So, good evening. Thank you for coming out for an encore presentation. Last time we were sleeted, snowed. The only snow we got all year was on Leap Day. Go figure. But Terry graciously agreed to come back and give a presentation because we were thrilled with her presentation last time. It was very compelling and fascinating. So we're glad that we could do it again. Before we go to our main event, I just wanted to let people know that this author's event is going to be a regular event, the last Wednesday of the month. The next event will be April 25th. We're featuring Katie Mason. Also that week, we are having our annual wine tasting event, April 28th. It's a annual fundraiser for the library. Tickets are $25 in advance. You can get them here or at Georgetown Liquors, or they're $30 at the door. And there'll be coffee and dessert for those who may not care for wine and cheese. So we hope everyone comes out for that as well. And without further ado, Carrie Flaherty.
Thank you, Amy. I'm glad to be back. I'm going to talk to you about my books and why I write them, and then I'm going to talk to you about self-publishing and how I self-publish them and market them, because it's very different than it had been 10, 15, 20 years ago. Not that I wrote then, I was busy teaching then. And before I begin, I'm just going to introduce everybody to my husband, Rick, who is the main man at Wooden Toy Gift. And he and I work together. We run a little shop, and my books are in that shop. My books are also at Little's Block of Shops, and they're at a bookstore in Rowley.
Broken In Books.
Broken In Books, I think that's the name of it. And they're on Amazon.com, and 3 of the 6 books are also in Kindle. And I'm still fighting with Nook, but I might get there someday. We'll see. So the books that I have written, I'll try to do them in order and try to make them memorable to you. This was my first book. It's called Teaching, Volume 1. And it really is, hi, welcome. It really is a compilation of columns that I had written for Phi Kappa Phi Forum, which is an honor society quarterly, or maybe 3 times a year now, I think they cut back. But it's a multidiscipline honor society, so they had columns for everything, columns for business, columns for science, columns for math, and they had one generic column for education and academics. And it was most often written by a professor when I was reading their magazines. And so I wrote a letter to the president of the society, and I asked him if he considered addressing some of the education and academics to the K-12 teachers that are members of the Honor Society as well. And he said, sure, why don't you apply for it? So I did, and so I wrote a column for them for about 6 years. It was supposed to be a 3-year term, but I kept coming up with ideas and sending in extra columns, and he would run them for me. So this book really is a compilation of those columns, and I'll give you a sample of the type of writing that is in it. The very first story in this book is called Classroom Shadows, and it begins with a definition of the word appreciate. And it says, appreciate, to evaluate the worth, the quality, significance of something, to admire greatly, to judge with heightened perception or understanding, to be fully aware of, to recognize with gratitude, to increase the value of. And that's a Webster definition for the word appreciate. And then I said, the classroom year is just beginning, all things seem possible, resolutions are fresh and attainable, the chalk trays are still clean, a dozen sharp pencils sit in your drawer, the stapler is present and ready, and the corkboards are cleared and waiting. But before you turn on the light, appreciate yourself in this setting. You will accomplish so much here. Learning will take place. Life will happen. How many people will gather in this room? How many will fit? 25? 30? Hundreds, most likely. Not all seated, but certainly present in thoughts, in memories, in spirit, in shadow. With each one of you will come many. Look at the room's shadows and appreciate them. You will spend the year with them. And I wrote that, and it goes on and talks about some of the issues that kids come to school with. The boy whose father died in prison, the girl whose mother died of cancer, and that these are shadows that come with the children, and that the teacher and the other children need to be at least aware that there are shadows, if not know the details of them, and that learning can still take place. And sometimes these shadows can give a nudge to create a teachable moment. And that there are people who think that teachers and students who come with emotional baggage should leave the baggage at the door and come into the classroom free of the baggage. But the reality is that they can't. And if you acknowledge the shadows and work with the situations, you often can teach as much or more than if you try to ignore them. So that's the first column that's in this book. And there are several columns. The second one is a morning meeting, and it involves a guidance counselor, a teacher, a student, a parent coming together in a morning meeting to discuss homework and the availability of computers in a house that has more than one child. And so I go into the issues of that. The third one I think might be my favorite. It's Pendulum. And it talks about the pendulum swinging and the cycle of education, and how at one point we're so committed to phonics, and then the pendulum begins to swing, and suddenly we're so committed to whole language teaching, sight reading. And then we shift back because we notice kids maybe aren't being able to read beyond what they can memorize, and so we'll go back to a modified phonics situation. And in math, we do the same thing. We start out, or when we went to school, when Beverly and I went to school, arithmetic is what we had. And we had little number tiles on our desk, and we would make, the numbers line up in a number line, and then we would do addition problems with the number tiles. And then we moved away from that, and we did, for a while, we did crazy things like sets and intersection of sets and unions of sets, and there were no numbers involved at all. And then we went to the far end, and we really felt that we needed to work with manipulative materials, and the kids should have blocks on their desk, a little bit like the number tiles that we had on our desk. And then, standardized testing is coming in, and so we had to swing back to the middle, and we had to make sure we had some of this and some of that, and that they were going to pass the test. And so education still continues to swing on this pendulum. And so I talk in this about the repetitive situation of the pendulum, and that if you have been teaching long enough, you recognize the stages along the swing of the pendulum, and you know that this stage isn't permanent, and it is going to evolve into this stage again. But at this point, it's going to get too far in that direction, and it's going to have to start swinging back. And so knowing about the pendulum can be reassuring to young teachers. So that's why I put that in there. And then I have another one about learning in circles, and it's really like a script of teachers talking to each other about learning circles and literature circles and Socratic circles. Then I have a chapter called The Rank Book, and it's how we go about distilling spelling and writing and grammar and punctuation and complex thought and critical thinking, and take all of those skills and situations and reduce it to one letter grade on a report card, and how ridiculous that is. So I write about that in here. So I'm a bit of a rebel in this book. I speak my mind. I didn't write it until the turn of the century, and at that point I had already worked 22 years, and I had reached what I call in this book the adolescence of my career. And I said that teachers go through developmental stages, just like people. And that when they're new, when they're really brand new teachers, they don't know a lot. And they don't really know that they don't know a lot. And then they become toddlers, and they're a little bit brave, and they try things out, and sometimes they fall, but they get picked up again, and they're learning. And then eventually they reach the adolescence of their career. And like adolescents, they think that everything that they have discovered is unique, and they are the first to discover it. And so they proclaim it. I think I was in my proclaiming stage when I wrote these books. And then they grow beyond adolescence, and they become mature, and they become the go-to person in the school building because they know what's happened before, they know the pendulum shifts, and they can help counsel people who are just scared of what is happening. And then they reach the point that I reached, and they know it's time to retire because they have forgotten a lot. They can't even remember how much they have forgotten, and it's time to go. So I go through the stages of teaching as one of the chapters in this book. I have some poetry in this book. One poem that I wrote about tenure and how it affects teachers and, by the way, their students. I wrote a sock story in this book about a teacher who used whiteboards, little small 8x12 whiteboards on the students' desks, and markers that were erasable. And he didn't have enough money in his budget to buy the erasers too. Buying the markers was tough enough. And so he asked all of the kids to bring in socks. And they brought in socks. And as the year went on, the socks became more and more colorful. And by the end of the year, they didn't know whose sock was whose, but they were all beautiful colors. And so that story is in this one as well. And then I think I went on at the end, kind of got on my soapbox a little bit. And I wrote a note for the future. And I said, the baby boomer generation is heading toward retirement, meaning a large number of senior teachers will be leaving our schools. What have we wrought during our tenure in public schools? What kind of a world are we leaving to our children? We're leaving the only kind we've ever known, but in somewhat better shape than we found it in the last century. We still have homeless people in the streets, but we have increased the number of shelters available, perhaps not enough, but more than we'd found. We still have ethnic and racial tensions, but no longer attributed to a unilateral oppression and unjust sectional laws. More gains are needed, but educational opportunities are vastly improved over what we'd found. We still have pollution in our air and water, but due to stronger laws and more awareness, pollution is in lower amounts than what we'd found. And I go on and I note the small improvements that we have made within our generation, and that the next generation will need to be aware of making improvements during their tenure. The next book I wrote is a poetry book. And I'm very clever with my titles. Poetry to Share, Volume 1. Very clever. This one, otherwise, is called Poetry to Share, Volume 2. I wrote a blog the other day for one of the other writers online. She asked me to do a guest blog on her blog. And I wrote it, and she said, "Oh, I love it. What's its title?" And I said, "If you've seen the titles of my books, you know that titling things is not my forte. So you can title it." Because when I was doing these columns, my editor did all of the titles. I was told that editors choose titles, so I never worried about developing that skill. But in this first book of poetry, I had been jotting down poems on scraps of paper, pages in notebooks that became other notebooks for other things, and they were just all over the place. And so I gathered up what I could find, and I certainly lost a lot of them. But what I found were mostly about my family. So I will read one to you that I wrote about my mother and I. This will make you cry, Beverly. You might want to leave the room. And I called this Rain Sketches. I did name all of my poems. I'm in a more naming mood when I'm writing poetry, I think. Rain sketches. We sat together, Mom and I, on the home's piano bench. She played her favorite tune for me. The bright room hid the storm beyond until we moved to face head on and sat to watch the rain come down. We sat together, Mom and I, before the rain-soaked window pane, our faces altered by the water's path. Through sheets of water, dark of night, we sat and watched the sky turn bright as lightning changed our reflections. In her face, I thought I saw mine. In my face, I knew I saw hers. But water streaming changed us both. We sat together, Mom and I. Her mother's face was next in view, her aunts and older sisters too. The rain continued changing us, reminding us of those we loved, rewarding us with memories. We sat together, Mom and I, with common features I knew then, that though she too would leave us soon, I'd find her in a well-lit room when next the rain darkened the night and falling rain would show her face in mine. I'm sorry. And that really happened. We really sat and looked in the windows were dark because it was dark out. The lights were on behind us, and we were like looking into a mirror. But the water falling down the pane really did keep changing us, and all of those people were suddenly there in the room with us. There's a lovely poem in here about Rick, To Build a Box, a poem about my daughter, The Scape and Scope of Life, a poem about my son, A Distant Pride. This one's a favorite too. This was when I knitted, we were knitting. I was knitting an Afghan not crocheting, because I can't crochet, for my niece who was expecting her first child. And so I wrote, if you sense a scent of pumpkin with a hint of fallen leaves in this blanket, I did knit a bit outside on Halloween, and the children thought me just a part of the scenery of the night, with knitting needles clicking underneath the lantern light. If you sense a scent of turkey with a hint of mince and clove in this blanket, I did knit a bit on Thanksgiving Eve at home, waiting up for Trish and Zoe, Tristan, Amy, Ralph, and more, needles clicking with Rick cooking in the kitchen by the stove. If you sense a scent of balsam with a hint of cinnamon tea in this blanket, I did knit a bit, Christmas Eve by the tree. Windows clicking lit my lap. Window candles lit my lap with needles clicking, while nearby Rob's Legos snapped together under Grampy's watchful eye. And if you sense a scent of wintry snow, a hint of glistening ice in this blanket, I did knit a bit, while weather wasn't very nice. Robbie's sleeping on the kitchen floor in Nana's house with me, while Rick pushed snowdrifts all night long on slippery Georgetown streets. And if you sense a scent of Nana's house, her creams, or Grampy's soap in this blanket, I did knit a bit in their kitchen, full of hope that one day the little stitches all would warm your baby's nights, each one made with thoughts and wishes that your futures will be bright. So that was really a picture of what had been a very difficult year in our life, because I was helping my parents to stay in their home as long as they could. There are more poems here that reflect family and friends, and I even braved one haiku in here. You have to be brave to write a haiku. Everybody criticizes them. The second book of poetry was really just more poems that I had found around the house, and I wanted to put them together and get them out to be read and appreciated and shared. And there's one in here about wildflowers that is particularly my favorite. I actually wrote this one fairly recently, I think last summer. And, well, the poem says it. My yard is a haven for all things wild. What others call weeds, I have loved since a child. The buttercups held underneath my small chin showed I love butter, although then I was thin. The dandelions grow as they did way back then, always turning to fluff to be puffed once again. Tiny spikes of pink asters stretch way up and over the little round blossoms that cover the clover. And the maple tree seeds that come spiraling down like a helicopter twirling before it finds ground. Whatever the wild green ground cover is called, it is rich and luxurious, and it need not be mowed. To think that some kill these young innocent plants, unable to see the wind's grace in their dance. What others call weeds, I rename as wildflowers. I sit and admire them for hours and hours. So this book has a little bit of nature in it, in a few poems. My next book is about Georgetown, and I wrote it at the turn of the millennium. And I wrote it primarily as a series of columns in the Georgetown Record. And Ted Wadsworth, who was the editor then, published those columns. I wrote one for each season to begin, and he told me that he might be able to pay me out of petty cash. And I was just delighted because for all that I had written for Phi Kappa Phi, it was written gratis for the Honor Society. And so this would be the first time I was paid for my writing. And after he had published the first column, and I had some nice reviews in the paper, people saying that, yes, I described it just the way they would see it. I called him up and I said, you forgot something. And he said, what did I forget? Didn't I get your name? I said, no, you forgot you were going to pay me. And he said, oh, well, you forgot to send me an invoice. And I said, oh, well, I will send you an invoice. And I did. And he sent the invoice back to me with a check for $25, which was huge to me at the turn of the century. And he wrote across the top of the invoice, Madam Columnist, here's your pay, or something like that. And I just was touched that he would call me Madam Columnist, and I felt very professional at that point. This book, I'll read you one of the early. This one was written around Thanksgiving time, and I said, it's a Thanksgiving thought on North Street, 1996. The first frozen flakes of snow swirled past the panes of old windows, catching the citrus color of the new street lights, just dusting the dark sidewalk up front. Georgetown Square is barely visible through the glass, yet alive with flashes of headlights, red and green traffic signals, amber blinkers, and a halogen haze. Dark skies force the lights earlier each day. Approaching holidays hasten the pace. The calendar is now between Veterans Day and Thanksgiving, and the season of family and friends is here. A time to slow a bit, to gather and warm each other with good stories and good food, remembrances and plans. And as I look toward the square, I wonder who before me watched out of these old windows. This house was built in the era of good feelings, following the War of 1812. Georgetown was still part of Old Raleigh then, but change was in the air. Agriculture and ice fishing were prevalent, but mills and shoe factories were gaining. Indoor occupations would soon outnumber outdoor jobs, and more people would be looking at the town through glass windows, steamy with the heat of hard-working men and women. Horse and carriage traffic would yield to trolleys and steamers, and finally to cars and trucks. But school children would continue to cross our square, their colorful jackets, hats, and mittens echoing the centuries before and the centuries to come. Hurrying home to their families, to their futures, they carried their books much as they do now, hugging them close or swinging them in bags on their back. Our town, our houses have provided people a safe home, safe from war, from famine, from urban chaos, and from rural isolation. Ours is a town that has been good to its families, and a town that has received much care in return. Our fire department is full of families who work together, husbands, wives, mothers, sons, brothers, grandfathers, sons and grandsons all taking turn, to answer the town's call for help, juggling their work and family responsibilities with their neighbors' needs, spending thousands of hours each year pitching in, helping out, raising money to buy equipment, spending time training to use the new gear, saving homes and saving lives because they can, asking nothing in return. Highway workers, electric line workers, police, public safety workers respond immediately to calls for help, anticipating and preventing dangerous situations, quickly repairing and restoring services, and the town's confidence. Educators work long hours at home and in the school, building, crafting lessons, finding materials that meet the needs of all our children, sharing and caring, year after year, generation to generation. Committee workers, secretaries, registrars, office workers all keep our history straight, our water pipes filled, our library open, our ballots true, and our resources protected. Hundreds of volunteers, scores of dedicated workers, thousands of people who love this town, who would live nowhere else, who cherish the beauty of our streets, the kindness of our neighbors, the laughter of our children, and the wisdom of our elders, all benefit from each other. We have so much to be thankful for in Georgetown, and not the least, for each other. Look beyond your windows. It is a beautiful sight. So that was my ode to Georgetown. I dedicated this book to the citizens of Georgetown, past, present, and future, and to their family members and friends who have enjoyed spending time in the small town atmosphere. This is a book celebrating the town's people. And the acknowledgments for this book, I wanted to honor a man named Charlie Flanders. You remember Charlie Flanders. He had written Georgetown's history. His stories I shared with children of Georgetown when I was a student teacher at Pearly School long ago. Charlie used to walk a paper street, an extension of Park Street, that on the Old Town maps continued from the library on Pleasant Street to the Pearly parking lot, now obliterated by the lawns of homes, including mine, beyond that, and leading out to Charlie's house further down North Street. One day, we may ask the town, Madam Moderator, to name that narrow piece of land the Charles E. Flanders Memorial Walkway. Of course, it would be in the middle of someone's lawn, so I don't know if we'll get it passed. And I would like to honor Dr. Lou Skyrick, who for years was our town moderator, holding the reins at town meetings steadily during decades of change in our town. And while thanking these men, I would be remiss in not thanking the women of Georgetown, who have in greater numbers stepped up to serve in many ways, politically, economically, as firefighters and police officers, and our first female town moderator, Beverly Enos, and our first female town clerk, Jan McGrain, are just a few of those citizens who dedicate time and initiative to our town. And so this book has many little short stories about Georgetown. A rather long story about the Georgetown Fire Department, because I am really dedicated to the firefighters in town. A little story about my dog and his last walk, or no, one of his last walks that he thoroughly enjoyed with me, and then the story of his last walk following. The firefighter story also talks about the young people in town who come into the fire department as explorers, like Boy Scouts, a branch of the Boy Scouts, and that many of them go on to become our per diem firefighters, EMTs, and paramedics, including my son, who's become a paramedic. And so this book really is just short stories from the beginning of the millennium up to now. And that brings me to my last book. And this is called multiple sclerosis, an enigma. And the disease itself is an enigma because it's very unknown, it's very unpredictable. Everyone who has it is different than every other person who has it. It's like fingerprints, we're all that different. The doctors are really in the middle of a debate right now as to what exactly multiple sclerosis is. For the past 2 decades, it's been considered an immune disease, an immune disorder. But some are now saying that no, it's really not an immune disorder, it's really a metabolic disorder, and that it really can be treated by eating a healthier diet and avoiding fats, avoiding sugars, staying with vegetables, almost not quite as extreme as a Paleolithic diet, which goes back to all vegetables and no grains because they weren't processed then. So there's a lot of debate going on right now. And so I wrote this book as sort of a discovery draft. I wrote it chapter by chapter. I submitted it to a group of writers online for review, chapter by chapter. And as I wrote, I would post it, and they would read it, and they would critique it for me, which was very helpful. And while they were doing that, I was reading their work and critiquing it for them. It's a website called Fan Story. And there are short stories, there are long stories, there are poems. It's a wonderful site. It gives a lot of peer feedback. And all you do is you buy points and you tempt people to come and read your work by paying for points that they will get. And you earn those points by reviewing other people's work. So it's a very, very copacetic group. So I wrote this book chapter by chapter, and in the process of writing it, I discovered what I really thought about multiple sclerosis and what I thought about myself as a person with that diagnosis. It was a diagnosis that I never wanted to hear, but I knew was coming because I had had many odd symptoms through the years and no time to go look at them because I was busy with children, with my parents, with my job. And when I finally was able to go and have this diagnosed, because one of my sisters, who's a nurse, wanted me to have this diagnosed, she said, stop treating the symptoms. Go find out what it is and then they can cure it. But they can't cure it. There is no cure because they don't understand the disease and they don't understand the cause. And the cause appears to be very fluid. They believe that the lesions that are on the brain, which show up in an MRI, so they really couldn't recognize them until the last 15 years or so. The lesions that are on the brain are attacking the myelin that coats the nerves. And by attacking that, they're interrupting or altering the nerve signals. And the nerves, of course, communicate with every part of our body. And so if a nerve is being attacked and it happens to be one of the nerves, one of the millions of nerves, on a pathway to my left leg, then my left leg might not work tomorrow morning. And if it's instead a nerve that leads to the optic nerve, then my left eye might not work tomorrow morning, or my right eye might not work tomorrow morning, or maybe they'll both be affected. Maybe it will be short term, maybe it will be long term. There are people with MS who are in wheelchairs, but there are many, many, many more who are not. And the reason that they're not is because years ago, people with MS were basically sent home to go to bed and rest, and don't do anything heavy, and don't do anything energetic, because if you get too energized, your body temperature goes up. And if your body temperature goes up, even 1 or 2 degrees, those little cells that are bothering the myelin in your brain or in your spine are affected by the heat and the energy. And so they used to be sent home just to relax and sleep, and we don't have anything to help you, but to take care of yourself. And so they often didn't get enough exercise. And today, the MS Society has a motto that MS stops people from moving, and we want to keep people going. And so people are encouraged to exercise, but within moderation. They're all warned not to raise their body temperature. So if you're exercising and you have MS and you start to sweat, it's time to stop and go to a cool place and relax. And if you don't do that, your body will tell you that you're getting overheated and that you need to cool off, because things will start going haywire. Your vision might get blurry, your legs might start being wobbly or something. Something will turn out to be wrong. So I wrote this book. I started it in my childhood because that's when some of the symptoms started. And I carried it right up until the week before I published it. I wrote right up until that week. And during that week I made my decision. And my decision was that as long as the doctors don't know whether these medications are helping or not helping, I'm not going to take them anymore. I am going to eat better, eat vegetables, eat fruits, eat nuts, eat berries, all the things that help to make a healthier body. And so I've been doing that now since November 1st. Let's see when I published this book, because it wasn't long after I published it. Oh, I didn't put the month, 2011, but I think it was October. I haven't been taking the injections. I was taking daily injections, which is one of the 4 prescriptions for MS. Now they have 4 more prescriptions that have come out. Some orals have been approved, pills rather than injections. I can't imagine putting that stuff into my digestive system. I just can't, because I know what it felt like when I put it into my skin. It was very harsh. They have infusion treatment now, where you can go in once a month and have an infusion, and it has to be very carefully monitored by the nurses and the doctors, which kind of sounds cushy to me. I would have liked that better than doing my own injections, but that wasn't an option for me because I am not symptomatic. I don't show a lot of symptoms. I don't have a racing progressive form of this disease, and that's really what the Tysabri infusions are reserved for. So in writing this book, I was discovering how I was going to handle multiple sclerosis for the rest of my life. And I think I've made the right decision to stay on a healthy diet, believe that it's metabolic rather than immune disorder, and just see how it works out for me. So that's my multiple sclerosis story. So I have here 6 books, all of which I've created since I retired last June. Actually, between June and November. Between June and November, I came up with these 6 books. Now, I told you that a lot of it was pre-written, things that I was gathering up, columns I had written, poems that I had written, found, and put together. But nobody publishes 6 books with a publisher. Publishers do things one at a time. Shannon Ivanovich, who's what she's up to now, the 18th or something. 18th, yeah. She's a marvel. She has a good publisher, one that will churn out a book for her every year or every less than a year. That's unusual, but it's becoming more common because she could whip through those books. She could have them all out in 6 months. She could have a whole 26 or something. This is called self-publishing. It's actually called print on demand. When people used to do self-publishing, they used to call it vanity press. Yeah. And it really had a bad taint to it. It was like, oh, you think you're so good, you have to pay somebody to publish that book for you, and they're not publishing it because they think it's good. They're just publishing it because you think it's good. And actually that's true about all these too. But it's become more acceptable, socially acceptable. It's become more financially doable. When you did vanity press printing, you would have to pay for a whole print run worth of books. And it might be, a small press might do 500 books, a large press like Random House might do thousands of books. And either the publisher or you would have to front that money. In a vanity press, you would have to front that money. Print on demand, I can tell the publisher I would like 5 more of this one, because I only have 3 left, or 4 left. And I could have 5 more. They would, because it's all digitized. It's all in the computer. They just call up that file, set it into their printing press, and kick out 5 books. Funny thing is, one day I got, I think it was the Georgetown book, but I'm not sure. I got a book, and it was fatter than the other ones. Like twice the fat, twice. And I opened it up, and my whole book was here, all the poems were here, but right in the middle of it was the comic book, black and white comic, one of these like Transformer comics that someone had written and had sent in to be published, and I guess it was at the end of my print run and the beginning of his print run, but anyway, they somehow managed to get it right in the middle of my book. I gave it to my grandson, he loved it. So I want to talk to you a little bit about how to do this. If you have a computer and you're used to using the Word program, then you can self-publish, because that's basically what the print-on-demand companies are looking for. So you type up your book, you can save it as a PDF, which is very easy. You just go to the Save page and you choose PDF instead of Word 94 or whatever you have. And then you go to this website. You can choose a cover for your book. All of these covers came from the CreateSpace website. I didn't have to create anything, they were all there. And I have the right to copy this, even though I have seen on Amazon many writers like this cover. I've seen many books with this cover and a different name and a different author. But we all own that cover, it's all ours. And so you send your PDF format file to CreateSpace. You send your choice of cover. You have to do a little work because you need to write something on the back of your cover, unless you want a plain white cover, but that wouldn't look very professional. So the day I had to do this one, I had forgotten it. I did this first, and then I did the poetry second. I was in a fall theme then, I guess, although it was in June, but I knew they'd be coming out for fall. And I knew I had written something on the back of this, but I didn't quite know what to write on the back of poetry because I had used up all my poems that I had found so far. Of course, we know I found more because I came up with this. So I wrote a poem on the computer as I was choosing the cover. And this is what I wrote. And this is just one of those off the top of your head things. I wrote, "Come walk with me, and we shall see the beauty of everything all around me. Beautiful people filled with love, nature's beauty below and above, the flowers, the grass, the brook and the fern, the clouds that form angels that gather in turn to images sought in the skies overhead, waiting to be written and to be read. Come walk with me, and we shall see." And so it was, I knew I needed something, so I just started typing. And then I admit at the end that these poems came from years ago in old notebooks and where I found them all. So once you push that button, CreateSpace goes to work. They've got the cover you want, they've got the text you want on the cover. You can add to their design by sending in your own picture. I really do regret this one.
Oh.
It's okay. It looks much better in small size on the back of the books. It's kind of revealing in broad size. I mean, you can see every wrinkle in my face. This one's kind of sedate looking. But you send it in, and within a few days, well, within 24 hours really, they say 48, but they've never taken that long. They'll come back and they'll say, "Yes, we accept your file." That means you sent it in as a PDF or a Word or whatever this particular publisher wants. CreateSpace takes PDF. And then they will print it and they will send you 1, 2, 75, whatever you want, but they recommend that you take 1 as a proof, so that you can proofread this in its form, and optimistically you will find any errors that you've made. This book, I went through 5 proofs on this before I had it right. I had people's names mixed up, I had things out of sequence, because I had been writing it chapter by chapter for my friends on FanStory. And so I'd been adding in things to remind them of what I'd sent the week before, but I didn't need to do that in here, because it was just a page before. It sounded a little redundant, so I had to really tinker with this one. It took me about 5 proofreads to do that, but they allowed me. And then I found out, after I had them printed in quantity, and I had them sold on Amazon, that my left finger trembles a lot when I'm typing, and so I have the word here, passed, P-A-S-S-S-E-D, on a cover in big print. And I thought, that's humbling, but we are supposed to be humble. Hubris and the gods don't get along. They like humans that make mistakes. The Indians knew that, the Native Americans. The Navajo always work one flaw into their blankets. The Greeks knew that. I'm having difficulty with her name, but there was someone who thought she was as good as the Greek goddess. And so she wove a web of a shawl. Arachne, yes. And so she so annoyed the goddess that she turned her into a spider. And so I thought that was okay, that on my last book I had one major flaw, but I did edit it a 7th time, and so my new books don't have P-A-S-S-S-E-D on the back cover. But I still have a few of these. They'll probably be worth something someday. Like those 1955 pennies that were double struck. That person probably had a tremor too. So that's my story about my books. And I will be happy to answer any questions. Oh, I wanted to talk about pricing books, especially pricing books on Kindle. I've put 3 of these books on Kindle, my 2 about teaching and multiple sclerosis. They're on Kindle. And the recommendation at some of the writers' sites on Facebook have indicated that pricing your book at 99 cents will get you a lot of buyers. It's even better if you price it at 0 and give it away. So through Amazon, I could do that. Because I don't have to pay for any printed copies. These copies cost me about $3.25 a piece. This one was about $4 and something because it's thicker and has a spine. But I would pay that minimal price, and then I would pay shipping on top of that, and oh my goodness, the UPS shipping is very, very expensive. Often more than the proof I was buying if I was buying 1, and sometimes at least half of a set of 15 books, half of the price will be shipping. But if you're selling them through Amazon, you don't have any printing or any shipping, because Amazon takes care of all of that. So. But I like to sell them here in town in my shop and have people come and look at them. So I buy them in small lots, usually 15 at a time. But pricing them, I thought about pricing my books at 99 cents, and then I thought, well, maybe I should try it. So I took my 2 teaching books and I priced them at 99 cents on Kindle. I didn't sell any. And then it dawned on me that people who want to read nonfiction writing about teaching want to read something better than something that's worth 99 cents. And so I think I totally cut myself out of the professional market by pricing them at 99 cents. So I have returned them to, I forget, 8 something or 7 something for the Kindle version. And I priced the paperbacks at $12. But when I sell them here or sell them in my shop, I often reduce that to $10 because I'm not paying anyone a royalty on top of my royalty. I sell these over at Little's Block, and they're $12 there, and she gets about $2 of that. And that's fair, because she's housing them and dusting them and keeping track of them. And the bookstore over in Rowley, I'm sure, will do the same thing, so I've priced them. When they're outside in another place, I have them at $12. But I didn't price this any more than I priced this, because although there's a vast difference in the number of pages, there's no less work in writing poems than there is in writing a memoir. Because poetry takes a lot of thought and a lot of care. And so, and my teaching columns, I think, offer a lot to teachers. And it really, I felt as though I diminished all of my work when I priced them that low. So I left them at the $12 price. And the Kindle is less because there's no printing cost on that. So that's my story. Anybody have questions about self-publishing books?
I thought maybe could you talk a little bit about your author support group and
Yes. Paul Jansen is a local author, and he and I and his wife and my husband met about, what was that, about a month ago, maybe? About a month ago. We have started a local authors group, authors and illustrators group. And if you know anyone who would like to join that, there's a couple of flyers on the back table on bright colored paper. But we're meeting, and it's our goal to be able to work with each other the way I was able to work on Fan Story with my virtual support group. And so we can talk about successes we've had, challenges we've had. I'm having challenges right now. I've decided to write a fiction book. This will be my first fiction book, and of course, it will take place in a school. And if I want to sell it, it will have a murder in it, because all the books that are selling on Kindle are murder mysteries, and I have been reviewing them so that I can get myself into the genre. I'm reading other people's murder mysteries, and I think I've read about 31 since January. And I review them, and I post my reviews on my blog, Terry's Thoughts and Threads.blogspot.com. I think it's on my card back there. You can take a card tonight if you want to check up on me and see how I'm doing. I enjoy reading them, and I enjoy writing the reviews of them. And the authors do respond to the reviews, and they're very appreciative of, which is very different than giving tests back in a classroom. You don't get the same response from them, even though you've worked just as hard at it. You know? But that's what I've been doing. I'm getting into the murder mystery genre. That will be my next book. And we'll see if it flies better on Amazon. These are selling very slowly on Amazon, but they're selling fairly well in person, word of mouth, etc. That's kind of the way that it's working well for me. I just read in the newspaper that one of our former selectmen or school committeeman, Mr. Sarno,
Publishing, yes.
is in a publishing company. So I thought maybe we would connect with him some night and pick his brain about publishing in our authors group. Maybe I'll invite him to come to that. What was your question?
I just wanted to talk about it and put it out there so people be aware of it. So like it's a great resource.
Right, and we have 2 or 3 other people that are interested in coming. We're going to have a book signing night. Paul and I will be there. Possibly another 2 or 3 authors will be there, so there'll be a variety of people. And it's going to be at Lisa Scala's Art Center, and she's hosting us. I think we're on our own for refreshments though, probably. And we'll be there at 6:30 on April 20th. And we'll be signing books, and we'll be looking at each other's books, and we invite everybody to come to that and take a look around at Lisa's jewelry that she makes. She makes beautiful things, and some of the other things in her store. So that will be a nice night that we have together. Rick and I usually do something on Small Business Saturday, which is around Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving time. Friday is that crazy shopping day in the malls. And Saturday, we want to focus on small businesses and have people shop locally. And then I guess Monday is Cyber Monday. People can go shop online to get whatever they didn't get from us. So we do that in the fall. We also have just picked up with the Friends of the Library a job that Jane Fields did for the town for years and years and years. She was very dedicated to the townspeople as readers, and she had books out in front of her house in baskets and in milk crates, and God bless her, she took them in every night. She protected them from the rain. I'm not about to bring them in every night, but we have taken over the little library, and a friend of ours who's out in Ohio had sent a website link to a website called Little Free Books, and it's a group of people in the Midwest who have started building small boxes that hold maybe 10 or 12 books and putting them out like a mailbox at the end of the driveway. And people are welcome to come and pick up a book and take it and leave one if they have one that they are willing to share. And so it's like an extension of the library, but no overdue notices. Although I don't think, do we still? No, we don't do that anymore. We don't do, I know Andover stopped that a long time ago. So Rick, because I'm not going to drag them in every night, built a weatherproof house, 2 stories, wrapped in Tyvek, cedar shingles, and asphalt roofing tiles. And it is beautiful, and it is on his website, Wooden Toy and Gift. And you can go and take a look at it by going down 2 doors past Pearlie. That's right where we are. We're on North Street. It's very easy to remember because we're 2 doors north of Pearlie on North Street. And we have a sign out front that says Wooden Toy and Gift and Terry's Thoughts and Threads. But on the top of the sign, we have a little directional sign. One of them says Wooden Toy and Gift and points up the driveway. And the other one points north and says North Pole. Kind of goes with the toy theme.
Yeah.
So that's our shop. So if you come down there are free books for kids. But as Jane always collected coins for the books, we decided we would keep collecting the coins from the adults for the adult books. So the sign says kids' books are free, adults please pay 10 cents. And so to collect the 10 cents, which goes to the Friends of the Library, Rick built a little cash box and it has a little sliding drawer that opens. It's magic. You put your coin in the circle in the sliding drawer and you slide it in and the coin disappears. And we save it for the Friends of the Library. So we figured the kids would like that and they'd use all of their parents' coins and the friends would benefit. That would work out well. So any questions? Yes?
I have a question about your poetry. As you've collected what you've written, did you find that you edited it at that point or took it just as it was?
I would say 90% of them I took just as they were. They were kind of written in the moment.
Yeah.
And for me to alter that later,
I wondered about that.
even just to clean it up a bit,
Yeah.
I think I would lose that moment. They were, especially the family ones, they were very special ones. It took me a long time to write the poem for Amy's baby blanket because I wanted to get the scent in there and I wanted to have it relate to the different holidays. It took me a long time to knit that blanket. I started it, I think, in the early fall when the leaves were changing. And I know I finished it after the January snowstorms because Rick was out plowing, he used to plow for the town. And Robbie was with me sleeping on the floor. But I wouldn't want to change any of that. And I think that was, it took a long time to write it in the first place. I made sure it was right the first time. I don't usually do that. I usually just write the poem when it comes, like the one on the back cover here. I like writing poetry. I find writing in a notebook with pen, I'm a different writer than typing on a computer. There's a more mellow sentiment to what I write in a notebook. I don't know if it's the fluidity of the movement and and when I'm typing on the computer, I'm very aware that someone else is going to read this. And I'll go back immediately and fix a comma that should have been a period, whatever mistakes I've made, typos, I'll go back and fix those immediately. When I'm writing in handwriting, I'll go back and do the edits later. And so it flows better, I think. Charlie?
Could you repeat your email address again?
Yes, I will. My email is tpolardi@comcast.net.
Spell it out.
TP, as in Patricia, ALARD as in dog, Y as in you. That's silly, isn't it? Y as in you.
We get it.
I have another email too, but that's for writing. Anybody else?
Did you say that the Georgetown book is available at Little's Blocks of Stories?
Yes, and there's some right back there on the table. And if you buy them back there on the table, they're $10, and if you buy it at Little's, they're $12. And both of us charge Mass state sales tax. We're very committed to paying our sales tax because sales tax pays for firefighters and police and teachers and all the things that we need. So Rick and I, we're registered to collect state sales tax. We do that.
So,
Good job, another question?